Welcome to Legal Tech Live. This is the podcast covering the people, products, and platforms transforming the legal industry. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain, founder of Legal Tech Live.
And I'm Hannah Zumau, our in-house marketing expert. Every week, we'll bring you unfiltered conversations with the founders, builders, and innovators in the legal technology sector.
This is the show for those interested in growing their businesses and improving the legal world.
And the founders and operators looking to learn from others.
So if that sounds like you, join us and stay tuned for the following episode. And welcome back to Legal Tech Live. We are here today with our guest, Erich Dylus. Erich is a lawyer, a programmer, a crypto guy, and a confidentiality and privacy guy. He is the founder of CamoText. CamoText.ai is the website. And there's so much in your background as to how you got here. I knew you through the Ethereum world and LexDAO during the DeFi summer and beyond. And we've both gone more into AI and other digital software stuff since then. But Erich, welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about your background practicing law, coding, and how you got to CamoText.
Sure. Thanks for the intro. So I've always had an interest in programming. I've been on and off doing computer science and programming for a while. Eventually wanted to go to law school. Started out at a firm doing aviation finance, of all things. Random, but very interesting.
That's one that when I looked up a little bit about your history, I was like, this is one I didn't know about.
Yes, yeah. It's a really interesting practice. It is incredibly high trust, huge dollar value, huge insurance amounts, just bizarre closing practices, if I'm being honest about some of those deals. But anyway, after a while, I wanted to get back into, get a little closer to the metal again. And so a little over 5 years ago, I started my own solo firm called Varia Law. It's still practice law every now and then with some smaller clients, a lot of founders, developers, some local small businesses too. It's a lot of fun. And so about a year and a half ago in my practice, I started using AI, and one of my kind of through lines in programming and kind of in law too is that I really strongly believe in security by simplicity. And part of security by simplicity is also handling the things that are highest risk first, prioritizing them. And with AI, my alarm bells were going off with privacy and logging and training and all of these different vectors, risk vectors to lawyers. So I was initially using AI to analyze, summarize, issue spot documents, and I was manually redacting client info, wiping metadata, doing all of the sort of mind-numbing manual tasks that lawyers are so intimately familiar with. And so I eventually wrote a program to help expedite that process. And so that is what eventually turned into CamoText, which I settled on the name because I thought it would be good branding to do camouflage text, but I'd have to explain it so many times I'm starting to wonder about that. But yeah, so it was initially just a Python script that I turned into a really simple, intuitive user interface. And the most important thing about it is it works fully offline. So once you install it on a laptop, operation is completely local. So CamoText customers, if they install the software, they never have to hear from me again. Yeah.
So what does CamoText do?
So basically it expedites what I was doing manually before to preserve privacy. So you load a document or a folder full of documents. You can apply user settings, which I'll get to in a second, or not. You click anonymize, and the in-app engine detects a bunch of categories of PII, identifiable information, like names, email addresses, UUIDs, GPS locations, monetary amounts, accounts, stuff like that. And it writes a new output where each instance of those is replaced with a labeled placeholder. So if you have a bank account, it'll be replaced with account underscore 1AFC, whatever. And so what that does is it completely obscures the original information, but it provides a unique point in the output for AI to use in its analysis and reasoning and provide back to you. I mentioned that it writes a new output because it doesn't do what some other redaction tools do, which is overwrite the original. So the original file is untouched. The way the software works is it extracts all the text, and for Word documents and Excel files, it also extracts the formatting, so it can write a new output that matches it, but is a clean, sanitized file that's more proper for AI use.
So then somebody can go and put that into their Claude without fear that what they're putting in there has the personally identifiable information or attorney-client privileged information. Is that essentially what you're saying? We get the sanitized version that I can now put into Claude or ChatGPT.
Yes, yes. And one very important feature of it is privacy is highly subjective. And if you're bundling all of this into software that runs on a laptop, it's not going to be perfect. Now, it's extremely accurate for things that have predictable patterns, but for things like names and organization names, if you have an organization called like Consultants Incorporated or something, that's a very general term that some models might recognize as being a corporation name. Some others might say, oh, this is just a general placeholder, and not recognize it. So this is just to illustrate that part of the workflow too is you have to have a human in the loop to review the output to make sure that everything's caught, or if too many things are caught, that you can easily say, nope, revert. But yeah, the most common workflow I use it for, and I think most of the customers use it for, is, okay, I have this draft and I want a second opinion on it. Put it into CamoText, anonymize it, use the output in my Claude interface or in Cowork or whatever it may be, and say, hey, Claude, old buddy, it's been a while, it's been 5 minutes. Can you take a look at the IP provisions, make sure that our client is tagged as client AF0, make sure this is decently market standard and somewhat favorable, however you want to prompt. But the idea is you're taking something that is data rich, problematic for confidentiality reasons, making it lighter, anonymized, and better for AI.
First of all, I want to say CamoText, to me, it made sense instantly. It was camouflaging the text. To me, that, I'm surprised that others have trouble with that. I knew I got that right away. Although I think you did have some more camouflage on the original site. Did you have?
Yeah.
That may have helped as well.
Yeah, I've had some assistance with my aesthetics, shall we say.
Since then, yes.
Yeah.
Hannah has done that for Legal Tech Live as well, because I don't have that part of the brain. So hilariously, knowing Erich from the Ethereum and legal engineering days in the crypto space, Erich reaches out to me knowing I was in legal tech and followed startups and stuff like that. And he sends me CamoText because he thinks, as I recall our conversation, he thinks I might want to use it because privacy is important. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't worry about these things at all. And he's right. And I was lazy. So I sent it over to Ivy Gray, who's a friend of the show and a big name in legal technology and who works at iManage now. And she just loved from the original. She's raved about CamoText to me, to Hannah. And so hilariously, you were trying to do Nick a favor and have him test something and clean up worry about his privacy. And he just was like, nah, I'm going to pass. Which was just purely me being lazy at the time. But it worked out because you got a huge fan of somebody who is constantly worried about removing metadata and other
information.
Confidential. Thank you, Hannah. So that is kind of how this started, and I'm loving to see that it's gone further since then.
Two quick things. First of all, very grateful to Ivy for reaching out and liking it so much. She's been using it for a while, it seems, and gives some great feedback. And it was just fantastic when you're starting out and you're building something that you use yourself, there is always this worry that you're in your own little box, right? Is anyone actually going to find this to be as useful as I do, or going to see it the way I do? So that was great. I'm very grateful to you, to Ivy, and you as well. The other thing that's hilarious is while you were talking about your own views on privacy, I could see your Apple Watch, and it looks like Siri is transcribing.
I'm sure it's listening to everything that I'm doing, right? For me, it was like, at what point do I spend the time trying to clean up all of the past information?
That's the idea. It's supposed to be fast and simple. And it's funny because I do have some customers that are like, this is great. Of course it's not perfect. Nothing can be, but it's super fast. It like takes a 50-page document, takes a second or two, and it's got a window to work with. And I have others that are like, why isn't this perfect? I don't understand.
Yes.
Why? It's part of the journey, I guess.
I have to ask are the ones largely who are saying, why isn't this perfect? Is that more in the legal space than in some of the other verticals we'll get to?
It's been not necessarily. There doesn't seem to be a clear pattern to it, to be honest. Right. But the other thing is, if there are customers that discover it, buy it, install it, use it, and it works well, I just don't hear from them unless I reach out. So
I'll say it this way. You had the problem, right? You had a problem you wanted solved for yourself. Is that how CamoText really came to be? You were manually removing this information?
Yeah, I've always been very privacy conscious, but AI has some unique twists to it. Obviously, models training on inputs can be problematic and is a common discussed thing.
Yeah.
Did I lose you?
We'll see if he comes back.
Sorry,
Eric,
I think I lost you for a second.
You were frozen for a second. No worries.
Okay. No worries. So I was just saying, like, I've always been very privacy conscious, but with AI, there are some very subtle and labyrinthian privacy issues to be considered, and models training on inputs and outputs is a common one that is talked about, that is largely mitigated by even the most basic paid subscriptions. But people don't necessarily know the extent to which inputs and outputs are logged by the servers and the hosts, and those stay for 30 days at a minimum at just about every tier. And to get a true zero data retention agreement with a provider is very difficult, usually only applies to their API products, and it's expensive. It's just not practical for solo and small firms specifically. And if you can meaningfully handle privacy first on your device in a pretty clean way, that leaves you flexible on the back end to use different services and maybe not trust so much in the megacorps to do what their 800-page, several versions, notice no consent privacy policies say.
As a barred attorney, how do you think about your own obligations around AI?
I think there's the client confidentiality and privilege conversation that we've had a bit, which is you have a duty to protect your client confidentiality and to at least have reasonable methods to mitigate some of those privacy issues, and in ways that you're not just trusting yet another counterparty, whether that counterparty is the model provider or in some cases a redaction tool that's a software as a service that's still remote processing your data. You're just adding a layer of trust if you're using that sort of solution. But another one is there is a duty to talk to your clients and tell them about don't bore them to death, but maybe try and explain in a couple lines the Hepner decision and some other fact patterns where you have non-lawyers putting things into Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, getting an output, giving it to their lawyer and saying, okay, this is privileged now, right? And it's a conversation that's better had early rather than late.
Sure.
Definitely.
This is highly relevant. I'm in a cloud-based business. Everybody's on the cloud, but why build it fully offline instead of a cloud service? I mean, I think I know some of it, but I want you to explain it for the audience who have some.
Yeah. Offline local apps, they're fully in your control. You're not trusting anyone. You can't be rate limited. You can't be usage limited. You are not subject to poor Wi-Fi when you're on an Amtrak train. Not to hate on Amtrak specifically, but I'm outside DC, so it's a common fact pattern for me. You have this assurance that you can use it whenever, however you like, and that's that, which is nice. Obviously, the privacy benefits are... Oh, no.
Frozen again.
I lose you again. Am I still here?
Yep, you're back. You froze up a little bit again.
Sorry about that. I'm going to switch to my hotspot. I got to back up. This is what I'm talking about. Poor Wi-Fi.
Yeah. We're going to keep recording.
All right. We are on ultra wideband hotspot. So now it's Verizon's. I'm calling out another provider. Now it's Verizon's fault if I drop off.
Yeah.
So we were talking about offline benefits.
Yes.
So the first one is, as I was saying, fully in your control, no usage limiting, nobody over your shoulder, no telemetry whatsoever. You know you're starting from a position of strength, maximum privacy, which is great. And part of that is it's much simpler to incorporate in workflows. It's much simpler to incorporate if you're deploying for a team, like if you're an IT manager or director at a firm or at a public sector agency. It's so much simpler to be able to say, yeah, you just install it once and then you're done, rather than, oh, you do this and then you connect to this API and every 2 months I need to come by and do some maintenance and, oh, I have to change the setting. Oh, we have a version update that'll disrupt something for some time. It's just very straightforward. And the big thing with privacy is that people tend to skip past it because it's a pain. It is. Privacy tools add a layer of friction in the user experience. I will fully admit that. Connecting to a VPN or doing manual redactions like I was doing before, sometimes you just don't have the time or the willingness to do that. When it's a fully offline app that is simple in its interface and able to be customized, it's just a way to actually get people to implement privacy rather than design, over-engineer something that ultimately doesn't get used and is not super practical.
Excellent. That's good. And doing it by download, offline version, you're already emphasizing privacy in the actual user experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of user experience, who does CamoText serve? Who are your ideal customers? What industries does CamoText fit?
Yeah, initially I just had lawyers in mind, of course, because I can't escape them. I'm even married to one. And specifically solo, small, mid-sized firms that may not have the ZDR API integration or the entire block server rack in their basement of a local model. So really, it's a clear match, right? For reasons that I know because I use it, but because it's simple, it's cheap, it's offline, it plugs into any AI workflow, great. So lawyers, clear fit. I then quickly discovered that there was some demand specifically from therapists, which to be honest, I hadn't really considered, but makes a complete sense in retrospect. And the workflows that they highlighted were, oh, I record session notes or I take session notes, write up something, and I just want, similar to a lawyer, I want an AI second opinion or a summary or someone on my shoulder, like a partner looking over what we did and what the conclusions were, that sort of thing. And therapists obviously have confidentiality and ethics obligations as well to preserve privacy, and they work with a lot of text and documents as well. And the third big category is public sector. And that working with the public sector is interesting, shall we say.
That's an interesting experience. I worked in the public sector for a while.
And what did you do?
I was a conservative, a public guardian, public conservative.
Nice.
I just know it's a different world. So I'm interested to hear your experience.
Yeah. It's such a natural fit for CamoText and their sort of AI use cases because, again, a lot of documents, a lot of text, and not a lot of time. They've got a lot of constituents to serve and a lot of things to do and a lot of long pieces of draft legislation or citizen submissions or whatever it may be, records. And AI would be extremely helpful for a lot of their workflows. And they not only have their own sort of inherent desire to protect confidentiality, but they've got multiple people in the hierarchy looking over at the privacy issues. And then you got the town halls and you have all of these layers of, but what about privacy? But what about privacy? When you're doing these test cases with ChatGPT Enterprise and again, CamoText is a nice fit because it runs on standard laptops. So another thing about the public sector is the equipment sometimes doesn't get updated quite as frequently. Mm-hmm. So it has to work on basic laptops. So those are the three main ideal sort of users. I will say that in the last several months, there's been quite an influx of EU users. I recently introduced CamoText International, which has native recognizers, models, interfaces for Spanish, German, French, and Italian in addition to English. And that was purely because I was getting so many inbounds from the EU that I was like, I have to build this.
That's how business works, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
The old,
So
yes,
speaking,
it is absolutely in the plans. Thank you for asking.
and now we'll build it to fit the demand. In that same vein, first of all, I'm glad to see the pricing has changed since I first looked at this 18 months ago or whatever that was. So there's a little higher pricing, but it's one-time pricing. So tell me about that pricing model.
Yes, I was wondering when we would get to pricing because I get so many comments about this, and it is the thing I am least sure about. Pricing is difficult. So CamoText and CamoText's other software, Camo Voice too, which we can talk about later or never, whatever. The whole point is once you install it and use it, there is zero remote access. I cannot charge a subscription because I cannot enforce a subscription. So it has to be, in theory, I could legally enforce it, but I don't have time for that. So, a big selling point.
Headache.
Yeah, a big selling point is you pay once, you download, you install, and you're good to go for as long as you like. And part of that is you also get free updates for a year after purchase. So you could see it as a pseudo subscription if you wanted to get the latest version over a year after, but you don't need to, it's optional. So pricing is tricky because I wanted to communicate that it's a valuable tool because privacy and confidentiality is valuable. However, I also wanted to communicate that this is not a panacea for your confidentiality issues, and it runs on laptops. It's not going to be perfect. It is impossible to have perfect privacy software because not only is the current privacy of data subjective, but whether something is problematic in the future is highly subjective to everyone's situation. So the pricing at the time of recording, the English version of CamoText is $59 one time, international is $79. There are plenty of solutions that would charge that at least per month. I wanted, at least early on, to focus on adoption and getting more people to use the software and see the benefits, and then work up to larger bulk orders, which I've fortunately had a few. But yeah, I'll be honest, setting a price for this is difficult. I have had plenty of people say it needs to be much higher, but with a much higher price comes much higher expectations that are inherently limited by the design of the software. I'm not saying I won't raise it in the future, but that's where things stand now.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was like $20 or something at first. So I'm glad to see that's no longer the case. But I may have said that to you right away too.
You
That
did.
May have been
You
like,
did.
more,
And I appreciated that.
Okay, good.
How exactly are you getting the word out there about CamoText? How are you able to bring on customers from the EU and even building your primary customers out in the US? What are your marketing tactics there?
The most important one has been simple SEO and writing articles, because it's still quite a unique product. I'm surprised there still really isn't much competition for CamoText. That I haven't found another app with this architecture, fully offline anonymization with the sort of user settings that CamoText has. So because it's relatively unique, if someone is searching for that unique thing, there's a good chance they're going to stumble across CamoText. So I've really done a lot of testing with what gets the most visits and downloads with keywords and language on the site, articles. I did a dedicated Spanish landing page and subdirectory and blog for the site when I did the native Spanish version, which worked well. I imagine I'll probably get to doing that for each of the other languages as well. And wow, am I really getting back into my language learning days?
I bet you are.
Yeah, it's fun though, because I have multilingual lawyers I work with that have been helpful, and I have generated an unbelievable amount of test documents to work with and that sort of thing. But anyway, SEO is a big one. And the other one that has actually worked is in-person demos, conferences, and CLEs, doing CLEs. Targeted outreach has not worked at all, I'll be honest. Not at all. It's very hard, especially now when they're OpenClaws firing off automated emails every other hour to some of the ideal sort of users. It's hard to differentiate. Do I use my personal email or the company's? Do I keep it simple? Or do I say, here's specifically how I can help? At this point, I'm jaded on that. But the sort of the tactic to put specific helpful materials out there and hope people stumble across it and agree has been a little bit more useful. So I think I'll probably lean into that. And in conferences, I'm fortunate to be near DC, so I show up at a lot of those, and in New York as well. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, you're in the prime spot for that interpersonal.
Yes. Yeah, and I have to. There's no excuse not to hop on the metro and go do it. I like it.
I have a follow-up question to the one I just asked. I think people's main concerns with at least AI in general, if they don't know too much about AI, is the privacy aspect. And it's just proven that CamoText sells privacy and confidentiality as a service. What would be maybe the second or third main criticisms that maybe you may have faced from customers, and how have you addressed those?
Yeah, I think imperfection is the most common one, which is just an inherent limitation. And we've talked about it before. The other one is, so when people think about redaction and anonymization, the first thing a lot of people think about is going into a PDF and blacking out things that are sensitive. And that is altering the initial file. Unless you copy it, you're overlaying or changing the initial file. The way that CamoText works is deliberately different. You can load a file from anywhere, cloud server, whatever, and CamoText extracts the text, and for certain file types, the formatting writes a new version in the output, and you can save it as the same file type, whatever it may be. That way, you're not tampering with something that someone else might be using, or you're also not preserving metadata or hidden data in the original files when you use the output. So it's a new output. The way I personally use CamoText the most was I would just copy the output text and use it as context in an AI chat, because text is the lightest, the simplest. There's the AI model and host on the other end doesn't need to run a script to understand what's in the file. It's just text. A lot of users still want to use output files for whatever reason that may be, and they have great experiences.
Can you explain for the audience what you mean specifically by output files?
Yes. So with Camo, the output window shows your anonymized text. So it shows the text and then the tags in place of the sensitive information in the original file. If you save the output, you can save it as a Word document, PDF, text, whatever it may be, but you can only, because it's a new file, and you can only save the formatting from the original file if that original file explains its formatting in some way. So with Word documents and Excel files, the way those files work is there's some information in the file that says, here's the formatting of this file and here's the text. So when CamoText writes a new output, it can write the formatting as well. PDFs do not work that way. Scanned PDFs, for example, are basically image files. So CamoText doesn't have what's known as an OCR model that looks at an image and says, oh, there's text in here. Let me see if I can see what it is and write it out. That's a huge undertaking, and local OCR models are still massive and not practical for laptops. So that's the other big one, is explaining to people that PDFs are somewhat unique in that even if it has detected text, it doesn't communicate the formatting. So your output is not going to look like your input directly if you use PDFs. And PDFs are heavily used. It's a common thing. I try to be very clear about it on the website and the user guide, but there are still some people that are using these grainy scanned PDFs and wondering why.
We are back with Erich Dylus. So what happened is we had a little technical issue. We lost part of the episode. I think I am wearing the shirt that I wore on Friday when we originally recorded. But anyway, we're back, and we were in the middle of Erich telling us about kind of second and third order privacy issues that CamoText deals with, or sort of like second and third most relevant privacy issues that CamoText fixes. Erich, do you want to go ahead and lean right back into that for us?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think I did laundry in time. For sure, it's a different shirt I'm wearing, but we'll roll with it.
That makes two of us.
Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of vectors when it comes to privacy exposure, and the obvious one is what's in the text itself, right? And we talked about how CamoText detects PII and replaces it with a unique labeled placeholder. But there are other sort of latent vectors that are just as identifying that people tend to forget about a lot, and that can arise in metadata, and it can be in broader context when you combine some seemingly innocuous pieces of information together. It can be a little bit more identifying, and that sort of standard of what rises to the level of pseudonymization versus anonymization, which is a really thorny issue that a lot of professionals deal with, requires some oversight, right? Some human in the loop review. So CamoText is designed for people to easily be able to check the output, not just to make sure things have been caught that would normally be caught in those data categories, but also for provisions that are just unique enough that they might identify something, or if it's a trade secret, or if it's something that just shouldn't be externally provided or exposed somewhere. And one of the features I really like is you just highlight any length of text, hit anonymize, and that gets condensed to a little placeholder as well. So that can be a term, it can be a sentence, it can be several pages. And I really like that because it not only is a simple, fast way to remove something that's identifying, but it also makes the context even smaller. And so that brings me to my other one.
So that's like
privacy vector.
It's a little bit like a reverse text expander, but that privatizes at the same time.
And it's simple, and when you go back to reinsert terms, if you reinsert an original text, it still gets reinserted, so that's nice. And the other is when you're dealing with heavier, richer file types, the metadata that remains can still be very identifying. The original author, for some files, the GPS location of when it was, where it was created, timestamps, version history, things like that. And then even more insidiously, if you're using a PDF or something from a third party, there can always be embedded information, there can be hidden data, there can be white text on a white background, all sorts of things that you just don't want to forward along, right? You don't want to carry over. So the CamoText model of extracting text and then writing anew in the output is nice for this because you know nothing in the no text that was in the original file is going to appear in the output that you won't be. I think I'm doing a double negative here, but you're going to see all of the text that was extracted because it's going to be presented to you in the output. So you're not going to unknowingly forward along the white on white background example, or you're not going to unknowingly forward along a document that has had its text treated, but its metadata not treated. So that's a real benefit of using a new output and a lighter output rather than overlaying an original file.
Quick follow-up on that is I feel like CamoText could just do continuing legal educations and sell to the Department of Justice for their inability to redact or hide information. Like that would be like an incredible client for you to get, and probably would keep you, because they have that. They've done it multiple times under multiple administrations where somebody just kind of highlights the PDF in black or the Word document in black, and then they post that online for everybody to view, and somebody inevitably undoes that. It seems like CamoText would be an ideal tool for those types of FOIA requests and releasing of information. Would that be a good use case?
If you can get an email response from someone at DOJ, then let me know. But yeah, it's the hang up is if it's a scanned, if it's an image of a PDF, if it's a grainy photocopied scan that doesn't have extractable text, CamoText can't really help them because text isn't extractable.
Right.
But for PDFs where the text is detectable, if you open it and you highlight it, you can see the text. It's not only simpler, it's just like, why would you risk something that is obviously able to be either reverse engineered or removed or inferred from, for example, just the length of the blackout or the things like that just don't need to happen.
Earlier we were talking a little bit about Camo Voice. I know that was mentioned. What's the broader vision for the Camo suite?
Yeah, Camo Suite still makes me laugh because it was like several people independently asked if that was going to be a thing, and I was like, I guess it has to be because it must be a thing. So anyway, my thing is, again, security by simplicity. I really just like offline local apps, no subscription, no account, like things that just work. And there's so much open source software out there to build upon where you can create really performant user-friendly, intuitive applications that work fully locally on laptops. And that's what the long-term goal is. So CamoText has proven that there's some market demand for text anonymization, file anonymization. Camo Voice is another one that's gotten some traction, and that is a speech-to-text voice typing audio file transcription app that works fully locally. Also has a global hotkey. So I built that because I, of course, wanted to use it myself, but the Whisper Flows of the world, they advertise local processing and fully client-side processing work, but ultimately there are server pings all the time, and if one of those gets disrupted, or if you unknowingly go over your usage limit and you're paying by the word, these are just terrible user experiences. And the Camo Voice is similar to CamoText. It's offline, so you can use it as much as you want. And I just like that sort of thing. And the last one is Camo Convert, which is a little bit more recent and a little more niche, but it's a file conversion app. So you can use it to extract audio from a video file. You can use it to bulk convert one type of file into another, whether that's an image into a smaller image file, things like that. So that is a little bit more niche, but CamoText and Camo Voice are certainly going to be focuses for the near future.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. And I think we talked about it a little earlier, but you talked about verticals, like therapists really liked it, lawyers, hugely beneficial use for CamoText, for anonymizing text. What other verticals are you looking at or potentially looking at in the future, maybe not at the moment?
Yes, you hinted at it with your DOJ comment, but it is CamoText and Camo Voice are, in my view, perfect for public sector. These smaller local, municipal, state agencies in particular that have, teams or enterprise subscriptions for the ChatGPTs and Claudes of the world, Copilot, Gemini, and have a mandate to protect confidentiality of their citizens and their fellow staff and whoever it may be, there's a lot of material out there, open issues, confidentiality, and I really just think CamoText and Camo Voice, particularly CamoText, are really well suited for these workflows where you have people dealing with mountains of text, more than they can hope to sort through, and so they're looking to AI to help summarize and issue spot and do things to augment their capabilities. And privacy is a concern. CamoText is a great tool to approach that, so I'm doing a lot of outreach is quite ineffective, doing a lot of in-person conferences, that sort of thing, trainings, webinars, because I do think it's a great opportunity for agencies to demonstrably protect privacy and do it in a way that's pretty low cost upfront. So
yeah, excellent.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. Do you plan on maybe trying to get CamoText to get some fundraising, or are you planning to stay bootstrapped?
Yeah, I might have said this, but as a lawyer, I have seen what comes with external fundraising, and I generally do not like it as admitted control freak publicly. I really enjoy building every inch of CamoText to include the website, everything about it. I really like doing it all. Maybe a little masochistic, but the nice thing about providing desktop apps and offline software is that I don't have much overhead. I don't have servers to maintain and expand and grow and scale. My scale is limited by how many people know about CamoText and know that sort of app is a good option for preserving confidentiality. So I'm not necessarily seeking external equity or debt investment as other startups might, but I would love to pursue some joint ventures, some cooperative arrangements, some co-marketing, co-building, whether that's consulting and showing how this might be used in workflows, or actually building a partially automated product that still has some human in the loop review. I've been exploring some things like that as well.
Yeah, I think we talked when we got cut off the last time that it is a lifestyle. It can change the lifestyle by getting that funding from outside investors, and where the company becomes the entirety of your life. Now, a company of any size can really become the entirety of your life, but certainly the demands from outside investors change that.
Yes, the expectations, the timeline, a lot of things that can distort what the product actually is in the short term. So it's still pretty young.
Yeah. Yeah. And who do you recommend as a guest? We're at that time again in the conversation where we ask our guests who they would recommend in a legal technology role, buyer role, go to market, founder, things like that. Who do you recommend?
Yeah, I pull out my crystal ball because I think she may be coming on the podcast in the very near future. But my recommendation is and was Jennifer Waite at AGG. She's the Chief Innovation Officer, I believe. The title may have changed. But I think she'd be a great guest because I had a great demo call experience with her and her firm with CamoText. And I have had a lot of experiences where I'm starting from, hey, this is where privacy issues can arise in the life cycle of an AI prompt, or what to look out for when you're attaching documents, starting from zero. And that is not the case with AGG. I was able to come on the call, explain this is a fully bundled app that works offline. It's meant to be very simple. It's meant to be a time-saving tool, not a full delegated automated product. And Jennifer and her colleague Alex Hughes in the IT department were both like ahead of the curve. They got it right away. They asked some very pointed questions. And anyway,
that's
Jennifer
a good
really
experience. That's a really great experience selling legal technology to law firms, because it's not always the case.
It's funny because when I speak to IT, I talk about the simple architecture, and they're usually pumped to not deal with any sort of external dependency to implement. The innovation officers, though, some of them are hesitant when it comes to something that's simple. If that makes it's like counterintuitive, but they can be a little skeptical. But in this case, AGG was very receptive. They knew what the issues were going into the call, and I think that she'll be a great guest because it's rare to get someone on the phone at a firm of that size and have them understand the nitty-gritty and be receptive to it.
Yeah, we're excited to have her on the show.
Where can people find you and contact you?
I am on LinkedIn. I have fortunately a pretty unique name, so I should be decently easy to find, and I would love to connect. And then CamoText website is camotext.ai, and my my solo practice's website is varia.law. So you search my name, and I hope at least one of those will come up.
Yeah,
I'd love to connect.
And that's Erich, Erich, and last name is Dylus, Dylus. The company is CamoText, and you can find them at camotext.ai. And Erich, we look forward to having you back in the future when the whole suite is just growing and expanding, and we look forward to seeing how things change in 12 or 18 months from now.
All right. Yeah, I hope so. Looking forward to it as well.
Wonderful. Thanks again, everybody. Stay tuned for next week's episode.